Fuck, it's small in here. All right, there we go. Danielle, I'm thirsty. Do you have coffee? This is a Shasta. I guess it'll do. Thank you. All right, let me check the template. Creepy factoid. Introduce show. Anchor FM. All right. Here's a fun creepy factoid. Okay. Stay with me. It might be a little bit crazy for you, but there is a ship in Russia, like a long time ago, known as the Ivan Vasily, and it was haunted, right? So, like, people would go crazy on the ship and throw themselves overboard or kill themselves and all this other stuff. There's supposed to be, like, only one survivor of it. I was supposed to do a whole special on this over on the Corporal Creepy channel. I wrote a script and everything, and just never fucking did it. I don't know. Is that creepy enough? Are you satisfied? I don't know why I'm tripping so hard about this. Danielle! I need help! Welcome back, everyone. I am Corporal Creepy. In case you haven't noticed, Jonas cannot be here with us this time. He's either gone missing, or maybe he just wandered off. Nobody really knows for certain, but he did leave me some instructions. They're very easy. All I have to say is, welcome to part 9 of Spores.
Luke checked the seal on his mask again, before pulling the fur-lined hood on his parka over the mask. The weather was picking up again, and he didn't want the cold temperature to crack the rubber. He was wearing a full, dry diving suit underneath the winter clothes. 4 months ago, the insulation wasn't necessary, but with the Shrike storms rapidly changing the global climate, he had to adapt again. And adapt he had. Adapted and survived, for much longer than everyone else. Luke had repurposed an old diving suit to protect him from infection, and thus far it had worked well. An abandoned clean room at the local university science lab made for an adequate shelter. He would use the decontamination room to wash off the spore on the outside of his suit, followed by a UV heat wash at 160 degrees to kill whatever remained. It was a painful and long process, but so far had kept him alive. Luke looked over the edge of a small hill that led into the warehouse parking lot. It wasn't steep, but he knew that the black furry coating that used to be grass would be as slippery as ice. He carefully angled his legs and allowed gravity to slide him down the hill, and he came to a stop just short of asphalt. He trudged across the parking lot, listening to the sound like fine grit sand blasting against his face mask as the wind picked up. Although it offered ample warmth, the fur lining of the parka was black with spore. He would never be able to decontaminate it and left it outside when he showered off his dry suit. Luke eventually reached the front glass doors and read the words, "Yo man moving in storage." It was unlikely that he would find food supplies here, but he might find candles and matches, and hopefully a survivor nest with some cans of food remaining. Luke pulled the crowbar off the sling on his back and jammed it between the doors, which snapped apart easily. Cheap shit lock, he thought to himself. He only carried a pry bar with him anymore. He hadn't seen another survivor in over 3 months, and the pistol he had liberated from a dead cop in a cruiser with stalk growing out of his eyes and mouth just seemed pointless anymore. Luke stepped inside and allowed the door to close behind him. The dim light from the outside allowed him some visibility of the interior hallway, but he used a small pen light to look around anyway. Most of the storage lockers had the locks cut open and were open. Their contents littered into the hallway. He picked a direction and headed off, hoping to find something of value left behind. Luke had barely made it around the corner when he sensed movement behind him. "Who are you?" a gruff voice asked him. Luke wheeled around, crowbar raised, and found himself staring down the barrel of a shouldered shotgun. Outmatched, he slowly lowered the crowbar to his side. "Just looking for supplies," Luke said. The man lowered his gun to his waist, but kept it pointed at him. Luke noticed he was wearing a yellow biohazard suit that went up to his neck, and a full-face diving mask.
Might have a few to spare. I'm Zeke. What's your name, boy?
The man asked before scratching absent-mindedly underneath the collar to his mask. This detail did not escape Luke, nor the undeserved courtesy. He had seen what happened to some of the infected, the ones that knew they were going to die. They often just wanted someone around to share in their misery. He'd seen this firsthand with his own mother. She'd come home from the hospital after being gone for nearly 40 hours. The first thing she'd done was walk up to his dad and embrace him.
Asked you a question, boy,
Zeke repeated. Careful or he won't let you leave here, he thought.
I'm Luke Thiel. Nice to meet you.
No sense in not using my real name.
You said you have supplies? Supplies? Oh yeah, food, bottled water, got a lot of that. Why don't you come with me and we can swap stories over a cup of ramen?
Zeke said, again scratching at something underneath his collar. Luke noticed that the hose coming from the back of the helmet that should have led to an air supply was actually just dangling loosely at the man's back.
Sure, that sounds great. Lead the way,
Luke said, mustering all the cheerfulness he could in his voice. He felt like he had about a 50-50 shot of getting out of the warehouse alive. Zeke eyed him warily for a second before gesturing to Luke's right with the muzzle of the shotgun.
You can leave the bar out here. Get it on your way out. My safe room is right down here,
he said. Luke shrugged his shoulders before tossing the crowbar into the storage unit with a loud clanging. This caused Zeke to ever so slightly lower his gun, and his guard. Luke walked toward Zeke as if to go past him. As Zeke started to turn alongside him, Luke's hand darted out and grabbed the free dangling end of the air hose. He yanked hard as he sprinted forward, yanking Zeke's helmet sideways on his head and spinning him slightly off balance. The shotgun roared loudly in the hallway, and Luke felt the percussion of the blast as he sprinted for the nearest corner. Luckily, Zeke was just blind firing and came nowhere close to hitting his target. Luke sprinted down the hallways, taking turns wherever they came up in the hallway to confuse his pursuer. He became disoriented, and at one point rounded a corner to find himself behind Zeke running away from him, his helmet now discarded. Luke caught a momentary glimpse of the black ribbons growing from the man's neck. He worked his way back outside, following unlit exit signs. Near an emergency exit, he happened to spot a bulk pack of candy bars. He quickly snatched them up and burst through the doorway to the outside. After he finished decontaminating his suit, Luke placed the chocolate candy into the sample tray that led to the interior labs. They wouldn't survive the heat wash, so he'd have to clean them in a detergent bath later. After 10 minutes of heat bath, Luke stepped into the lab and peeled the suit from his drenched body. His 6-year-old brother Isaac was waiting for him. "You took a long time," Isaac said. "Find anything good to eat?" "Maybe," Luke said. "Is it your birthday?" "It was last week. You didn't get me anything," his brother complained. "Well, too bad. Just 349 more days, though, right?" Isaac folded his arms over his chest at this and pouted. Luke smiled and rubbed his little brother's hair playfully. He'd share the candy with him later, but for right now he just needed to sleep. Luke crawled onto a cot in the side office area and passed out immediately. He slept fitfully, disturbed by dreams of his father making him promise to take care of his younger brother. His father said this to him from outside the car that he had locked them in. Luke remembered seeing the black stalk just barely peeking out from underneath his father's mustache.
"You take care of Isaac. You keep the both of you safe for as long as you can, but stay together, you understand?"
He woke up suddenly at a strange noise. He looked over at his watch, 9:30 p.m. He'd slept for almost 20 hours, and his stomach grumbled in protest. He sat up in his cot and rubbed his neck. He heard the noise again, a soft coughing noise. Luke stood up and walked to the main lab area. Isaac sat in an office chair. Surrounding him were several empty chocolate bar wrappers. He could see chocolate smeared on his brother's face. "I don't feel good," Isaac said. "Of course you don't," Luke answered. "You can't eat that much candy and—" He froze in mid-step from approaching his brother. What he thought were chocolate smears on his brother's face were clearly a small forest of stalk growing from his lip and chin. The candy. I hadn't cleaned it yet. I just left it in the tray. Luke backed away into the decontamination suite, dragging his suit along with him, and slapped the door close button, sealing himself in the room. He breathed heavily and watched his brother come to the door window and look at him pensively. "Luke, what's the matter? Why are you leaving? Am I going to get sick like Mommy and Daddy?" Isaac said. Luke didn't answer. He just stared at his little brother, and then started pulling on his dry suit. He listened, detached, as his brother protested, then begged, then started crying. But Luke's mind was already working out a plan, adapting. I'll suit up. I got enough air to make it to the dive shop to pick up another tank. There's food inside the hospital. I just have to find a way to clean it when I make it to... Where? Where am I going? He remembered his father's words to him and realized that he misunderstood the true instructions. He had only heard the first part before, but now all he heard in his head was, "Stay together." His brother's wailing had turned into soft sobbing. Luke suddenly realized that the entire time he had been dressing, he was also crying, and he felt the cold, salty tears drying on his cheeks. He had kept them both safe for as long as he could. Now he needed to finish his father's last request. He pulled off his helmet and stepped back inside.
All right, let's get started. I've got my coffee. I've got my notes. I'm ready to... What do you mean? What do you mean it's time to go? I just got here. Fine. Anyway, thank you guys for listening. And remember, if you have any information about Jonas or his whereabouts, make sure you email them to storiesfromdarkplaces@gmail.com. And if you're looking for more horror stories or something like them, check out the Corporal Creepy channel on youtube.com. Remember to stay creepy.
Stories from Dark Places was recorded before an imaginary studio audience. All stories performed on this podcast have express written consent from the original author. Jonas Armitage, his studio manager, and the entire staff of WZHP Radio Innsmouth are fictitious characters, and it's probably for the best that you continue to believe that.